another moment and we'll get started. Thank you so much for being here. All right, it is 2:01, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. We certainly want to honor your time here today. And thank you, Erica. I noted that you started recording. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ashley Hines. I have the honor of serving as the Director for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion here at AAH. And I'm thrilled to welcome you to our Who We Are series. Today's session is actually the 5th, so I think I have to stop saying new series, but it's the 5th of our series. We have hosted a few for Hispanic Heritage Month, Disability Employment Awareness Month, Veterans Day, and of course today in honor of our winter holidays and celebrations. We're already planning ahead for MLK, Black History Month, Women's History Month, so stay tuned, there is much more to come. A bit of how this series launched is really as a brainchild, if you will, of the Inclusion Council here at AAH. The teams across our footprint shared interest in really bringing to life our campaigns. You can drive on the expressway, you can walk through our halls, and you can see branding related to different observances, and colleagues and team members are saying, hey, but we're not really talking about this. How are we bringing it to life? So this is how we're bringing it to life, at least our first step. And I'm excited that we've been able to partner across the organization today with Mission and Spiritual Care. And in particular, Reverend Lex Cade-White, who I get to work very closely with throughout the year. So this is a special treat for me. But really the Who We Are series is an opportunity for us to celebrate and honor the richness of our heritage and cultural groups. It is, again, just one way, because there are many ways that we lift up and affirm communities with particular emphasis on those who are underserved and underrepresented. So in particular with this conversation, we were talking about how during the season, there's a lot of different celebrations, and quite often we get central and focused on a few because of, quite frankly, entertainment, watching TV and things like that, and consumerism. We have those deep conversations, right, Reverend Lex? So either way, we said, let's expand it. Let's expand the conversation. Let's invite an opportunity to look at more broadly what we're honoring. And so that's how this particular session came up. So I am now just going to say we typically for these series have maintained the video for all of our presenters. So I'm going to go off very shortly. I'm going to hand it over to Reverend Lex in just a moment. But on this next slide, you'll see she is going to serve as our moderator and our leader throughout the series or throughout today's session. And then we have some awesome panelists as well. Dr. Kay Jacobs is joining us. She is a physician and PEDS leader, but she is also an Inclusion Council leader. So it's just a wonderful double opportunity here. And then Rabbi Yanni Meadows will join us as well. So I am super thrilled. I'm going to stop talking and hand it over to Lex. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. All right, so today we're going to be talking about two main traditions, Kwanzaa and Hanukkah, with Dr. Kay and Rabbi Yoni. And then I'm going to share a little bit about 3 additional holidays, Los Pasados, Yule, and Soyal, all to keep us mindful of the plethora of holidays that are represented this lovely time of year. So I'm going to pass it over to you, Dr. Kay.
Thank you. Are you okay with advancing the slides when we're ready? Is that okay? So I don't have to share. Okay, perfect. All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Habari Gani, everyone. I am Kay Jacobs. I'm one of the PEDS ICU doctors here, and I am so excited to be talking to everyone today about Kwanzaa. I'm going to share as much as possible in just a couple of slides, but feel free to reach out to me later in the chat or via email if you have any further questions. Today, we're going to focus on more so the meaning and spirit of Kwanzaa, and not so much the pronunciations of some of the words words you'll see here today because we would be here all day having a Swahili lesson, and I would probably have to invite my father because I have lost so many skills. So let's move on. You can advance to the next slide. So the name Kwanzaa is derived from the phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa, which means first fruits in Swahili. And this idea of celebrating the first fruits is not foreign, right? There's so many cultures that do so with crop over and harvest and all of those things. So it's a very similar concept of that. During Kwanzaa, we celebrate the first fruits as a way of saying, there's no English translation for this, but before the year is done, you have to give thanks to your ancestors for guiding you through the year, preparing you for the year. And we do that by offering up the first fruits and saying thank you, or asante or asante sana. It was created in 1966 by Dr. Karenga during the Pan-African movement as a time to celebrate our rich history, our culture, our values, our family, our community. One of the biggest misconceptions about Kwanzaa is that it was started in Africa. This is a US-born holiday, and is meant to celebrate the African diaspora. Kwanzaa is celebrated from December 26th to January 1st. So you'll see that there's 7 days here. So it's a week-long celebration. And each day we celebrate a different principle. Together, these principles make up what is known as the Ngozi Saba. And so that is just the idea of the principles you see here. Each day there is a different activity to acknowledge the principle of the day. So for example, pre-COVID, my family was much more robust in having something huge every day. Post-COVID, we have been smaller in events, mainly because we don't include some of our elderly people now with all of the viruses and stuff. But so for Ujima, one thing that we might do is adopt a park, because that would be a way of collectively working together and showing some type of responsibility for our neighborhood, for the kids in the neighborhood and things of that nature. Maybe for Ujama, we may go to a Black-owned business and purchase something to eat or food or an attire or something like that to kind of symbolize cooperative economics. The phrase habari gani means what's happening, what's up. It's something that you would hear at the start of the day of Kwanzaa, and your response would be the principle of the day. When I was younger, I used to hate when someone would walk up and say this to me because I couldn't pronounce so many of the words and I would really just kind of fumble through it. It's so funny. As I've gotten older, it's much better, and I see the younger kids struggle through it, and I would just think to myself, I remember being like, I don't know what's up. I'm going to remember. I talked about this morning. So that is what you may hear as a greeting is habari gani. And you would hear that from an elder or a leader who might be leading the event for the day. Okay, you can advance to the next slide. Oh, I will say this, day 6 is my favorite day, Kumba. I think that was a question that was asked. What's your favorite part of it? It is the day of creativity. And so every year for Kumba, pre-COVID, we used to have a big talent show with all of our cousins, and we would do it for our grandparents. So it was a way of paying respect for our living elders. And it was just always so much fun, especially because it became a little competition between the cousins as we got older about who got the best on their piano skills or something like that. And this is also the day of the feast. Fun fact, the first feast associated with Kwanzaa was actually added by an activist here in Chicago after Kwanzaa was already created. So Kwanzaa was 1966. The first concept of the first feast was added in 1971. And the first feast in Kwanzaa was started here in Chicago. There is a traditional setup that is symbolic for Kwanzaa. So as you see on this slide here, you can see the candles, candle holder known as a kinara, which probably reminds you of menorah. But Kwanzaa has no religious affiliation. It is not a religious holiday, which is also one of the biggest misconceptions. It's not a religion. It is meant to facilitate unity amongst people of African descent, regardless of their religion or having no religion, not being spiritual at all. Because it is not a religious holiday, it is not considered a substitute for Christmas. So sometimes I would meet people when I was younger and they'd be like, oh, you miss out on Christmas. And I'm like, no, I do Christmas. And then I do 7 days of fun because the events of Kwanzaa are really great to do. So it's not a substitute. The colors associated with Kwanzaa are ones that might be very familiar because they are the same colors of the Pan-African flag. Red represents struggle and self-determination. Black represents the people, and then green represents the earth. With Kwanzaa, we start with the center, which is the black candle, and then move on from the red all the way down to the green. Okay. You'll also see here that there are other things that symbolize what the whole goal and the spirit of Kwanzaa are. There's a cup that symbolizes unity of the family and of the community. There is fruit that symbolizes fertility and nurturing the offspring. There's a mat, which means basically that nothing can be built without having a strong foundation. The Nekaiya is a very sacred part of Kwanzaa. We have Nekaias from years and years and years and years and years ago. And then we also have some that some of the younger kids have made because it is one of the activities now that you often see in Kwanzaa. There is a gift associated zawadi, which is given on the last day. That gift is meant to be personal and homemade. So many times, an Nekaiya is the first gift that you may learn to make to gift to someone for Kwanzaa. There's fruit that symbolizes the basis of the holiday. And then again, of course, we talked about the candles and the kinar. So this is a traditional setup that you might see on a countertop, a mantle, or something along the lines of that to just kind of remind you of the goal of Kwanzaa and the fruits and saying thank you. There was a question in one of the emails that was sent out about what does Kwanzaa mean to you? I did not understand the importance of Kwanzaa until I became a teenager. And it became such a personal and emotional thing for me because I really began to understand that the goal was to bring people of African descent together, and not just together in a way that was like, oh, share your family, but learn about your culture, because in so many instances we were not being taught that. And there was so much cruel history that was meant to separate us as a people, whether or not it was from north, south, light skin, dark skin, all of these things. And Kwanzaa, the whole purpose was to say, no, we are the same, and how to come together and celebrate that, and how much it would have, in my head, really changed things if everyone of our descent did celebrate Kwanzaa. So it wasn't until a teenager that I really valued that. Before that, I just wanted to do the talent show and something like make something. But now I really appreciate the values that my family instilled in me. It was my first exposure to Swahili. I would have never sought that out. Growing up and taking language in school, I always laughed at my dad. I was like, that's never gonna catch on. And now I'm like, oh gosh. Let me remind myself of so much that I was taught before. And what is the main thing I want people to understand about this celebration is that it's a celebration of history and culture, and it's a promotion of unity. Don't be afraid to ask someone about Kwanzaa if they celebrate. Many people do, some people don't. Some people have very different experiences with it. But for me, it is my favorite holiday because it is a celebration of culture, and I look forward to the Kwanzaa events that I'll be attending this year in Chicago. I hope that wasn't too long. Okay.
That was perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Hanukkah, next slide, please. So Hanukkah, I really appreciated, Dr. K, what you said about Kwanzaa not being and that really was a fantastic presentation. I really appreciated what you said about Kwanzaa not being a religious holiday, because something that I share with people that often can be a surprise for people is when I share with people that my conception of myself as a Jew, as a Jewish person, is that I'm not religious at all. I'm part of the Jewish people that have a culture, and part of that culture includes what Western culture might call religion. So first and foremost, what is often called Judaism is what I understand to be the constituent culture of my people that has been passed down to me from my ancestors for thousands of years. That having been said, Judaism is usually considered one of the three Abrahamic faiths, the three spiritual traditions that began with Abraham. And the connection between the Jewish people and Christianity and Islam is Christianity, of course, began as a group of Jewish people that later broke away from the larger group of the Jewish people, and Islam drew upon Judaism, the Jewish tradition, heavily in its conception of its own faith tradition. So everything sort of flows, in and out of each other. So Hanukkah, the word Hanukkah itself does mean dedication. The idea here was that about 2,000 years ago, the Jewish people were living in our homeland, the land of Israel. However, we had a big problem. We were being ruled over by the Greeks. And this was an existential crisis for the Jewish people because we did not understand how it could be possible that we could live in our own land, but yet be subject to foreign domination, and to someone else running the show. And the struggle for Hanukkah really came as a minority of the Jewish people decided that what the Greeks were doing, which was trying their level best to eliminate Jewish culture, not eliminate Jews as physically, not to eradicate us. It wasn't a genocide, but it was an attempt by the Greeks at the time to stamp out the Jews as a distinctive people. And many of the Jewish people were enamored of Jewish culture and were in a lot of ways were fine with that. And really were giving up their distinctiveness and assimilating into the majority Greek culture. A minority of the Jewish people said, no, we're going to fight against this larger group, this majority culture, this dominating cultural force. And if we have faith that we'll be helped by God to win, to emerge victorious against this vastly superior force. And it actually happened. But part of understanding something about Hanukkah is that sometimes Hanukkah is portrayed as the Greeks as a unified community fighting against this non-Jewish community, the Greeks that were trying to oppress them. The most bitter fight within the Jewish people was really Jews against Jews, was Jews not agreeing upon what does it mean to live a meaningful life, and is it okay to assimilate to a larger culture or not? And this is something that has a tremendous relevancy for us today as the Jewish people continue to try to figure out what does it mean to live as a minority in a much larger world. And there aren't that many Jews in the world. We're only about maybe 18 million people we just hit 8 billion as a planet. So there are very few of us. So there were two miracles. The first miracle was that militarily we won, and we were able to retake the Holy Temple, which was the focus of our national and spiritual life. We were able to take control over that from the Greeks and to rededicate it to our service of the one God, of our God, as opposed to the Greek gods. And when we went in to relight the menorah was this 7-branched candlestick that burned night and day in the temple. We realized that the Greeks had trashed the place and had tried to break everything they could get their hands on. But we found one small jug of oil that was still sealed and hadn't been touched by the Greeks. However, it was only enough oil for one day. That's a problem because it took 8 days to produce more. So the Jewish people at the time said, well, I guess we're going to light the oil, do the best we can, and have faith that somehow this will work out. And there was a second miracle that they relit the menorah with this little bit of oil that was enough for only one day, and it lasted 8 days. So you have two contrasting miracles. You have one a miracle of one nationalism against another nationalism, a military miracle, and then second, a spiritual miracle of how can a little bit of oil that was only supposed to last for one day, it lasted 8. Ultimately, it is a festival celebrating freedom, but it's a particular kind of freedom. It's a freedom of the people to assert its own identity. And it's more than a little ironic that the holiday of Hanukkah, that is so well known and better known than our far more important holidays, at other times of the year, Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shavuot. Hanukkah is a minor holiday. I'll get to that in a minute, but Hanukkah is a minor holiday. But because of its proximity to Christmas in America, it's often the one Jewish holiday that non-Jews have heard of. It's very ironic that this is a holiday of the Jewish people fighting against and asserting our right to be separate from other cultures. And it's a holiday of insisting on being grounded in who we are in order so that we can therefore be a part of a larger society and celebrate others as they are. But the Jewish people, because we're so few and have been through centuries of people trying to get rid of us, either physically, spiritually, or both, we understand that if we don't know who we are, and this is a linkage that I'm experiencing to Kwanzaa as Dr. K, you presented it, if we don't know who we are, we can't support others in who they are. Next slide, please. So Dr. K already mentioned the menorah, and the menorah here actually is a particular kind of menorah that is only used once a year on Hanukkah. It's called a Hanukkah, and it has 8 candles, well, 9 candles, 9 candles in it, as opposed to the 7 branches of the lights of the candles that were in the temple. The 9 candles, you have 8 days of Hanukkah, but then you have a shamash. And a shamash in Hebrew simply means someone who helps out or a servant. So it is a helping candle. This candle is used to light all the other candles. Its only significance is to serve others, which as a chaplain certainly has resonance for me. I think for all of us in healthcare has resonance for all of us. It derives its meaning through its relationship to the other candles. The miracle of Hanukkah was done through oil, specifically through olive oil. Olives have a tremendous spiritual and historical meaning for the Jewish people. So you eat anything fried. It's delicious, not so healthy, but delicious. Jewish people live all over the world. So Jewish people eat different foods all year round, but in Hanukkah, it's no exception. European Jews, which we call Ashkenazim, European Jews usually eat fried potato pancakes, which are called latkes. And Jews that are called Sfardim or Mizrahim, Jews that came originally from medieval Spain, and then we were expelled from Spain in 1492, or Jews that lived in the Middle East and North Africa, eat sufganiyot, which are fried jelly donuts, delicious. And you give gifts. Some families will give a little gift each day of the 8 days, or some families will do one big gift. My own family does basically everybody's name goes into a hat and you pick a family member and you get them something. But again, the focus of Hanukkah is not gift giving. There's traditions of gelt, which is money given on Hanukkah. Often in America, it's chocolate money. Nuts and raisins in Europe European Jews, nuts and raisins were symbols of prosperity. And then the dreidel. So there's an old Jewish story that under the Greeks, Jews were forbidden to learn Torah, to study the texts of our tradition, which are we have so many texts, thousands, and it's a central part of our culture is to study. The Greeks forbade it because they understood full well that if we don't maintain the study of our tradition, we will culturally die out as a people. So the way we got around this was that we would study. Then when the Greeks came around to check up on us, we would take these dreidels, it's a spinning top, and pretend to be gambling instead of studying Torah. So then we would evade being caught. So this continues today, and it's a game we play with children where you spin a top, and the Hebrew letters on the side of the top stand for Nes Gadol Hayasham, a great miracle in Hebrew. A great miracle happened there, and each letter corresponds to a word in the phrase. And depending on which letter you land on, you get some of the winnings, all the winnings, none of the winnings, half the winnings, however it goes. And again, Hanukkah is a rabbinical holiday. It is not what we call a deraisa, a Torah holiday, a biblical holiday. So when we talk about Passover, we talk about the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, we talk about Yom Kippur. These are all mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. And these are all much more central to our culture and to our spiritual life, and are much, much bigger. If you live in Israel, as I did, Passover in a city like Jerusalem, the entire city shuts down. Hanukkah in Jerusalem is beautiful. People are lighting all these Hanukkahot, these menorahs, and they place them outside their homes. So you have all these sort of flickering lights all over the streets of Jerusalem, and it's very beautiful. But it's a minor holiday. There's no restrictions on work. It's a nice time for family, but that's really all that it is. It's not Jewish Christmas. And the last thing, the lunar versus solar calendar. So Jewish life follows a lunar calendar, just as the Muslims do. The only difference is that unlike the Islamic calendar, we add a leap month to keep the holidays in certain seasons of the year. You can't have Passover in December. It just won't work. It has to be in the spring. Unlike Ramadan, for example, which can be any time of the year in Islam. So Hanukkah is always November, December, somewhere in there, but it floats. This year, the last day of Hanukkah is December 25th, which of course, because God is ironic, is my English birthday. So I'll be celebrating the last day of Hanukkah and turning 53. And it's very common in America for Jewish children to grow up. You have two birthdays. You have an English birthday and a Hebrew birthday, because you have the day you were born on in the Jewish lunar calendar, and the day you were born on in the secular calendar. And if you grow up more secular, more assimilated, you're probably only going to celebrate the English birthday. If you grow up in more traditional, as I am, you're going to be more likely to celebrate the lunar birthday, the Jewish calendar birthday. Oh, thank you very much. So Hanukkah is a time where we take time as families, but also as communities, for us to really reflect on what does it mean for us to be a community that has survived against all odds. We've survived in exile, we've survived out in a world that has often been hostile for 2,000 years. And Hanukkah is a time for us to celebrate the fact that we're still here, And we're the inheritors of a tradition that is much greater than any of us living today. Next slide.
Thank you, Yoni. So these two holidays that new speakers have spoken about today reflect on the reclamation of heritage, of the power of community, and of knowing one's own story and origin of their community. One is about the Black community and one is of the Jewish community. Both communities experienced vast multi-generational oppression and or trauma that continue on to this day. Both are commemorated during similar times of year. And as Yoni shared, in the Jewish tradition, it's based on the lunar calendar, and Kwanzaa is a more fixed, it's always the same date annually that it occurs. So I wanted to weave those connections as well. Is there any other further connections that you, Yoni, or Dr. K would like to share before we go to our winter mix?
I think that was a really great summation of the connection between the two. And I think that just kind of hearing them back to back in a presentation really just highlights how very similar and how closely connected and rooted in the same principle both are. And these are just things like this that are constant reminders of how much we are more alike than we are different, and how the timing of both of these holidays is so powerful too, because at the end of the year is a great time to reflect and get those reminders so that at the start of the year you have some principles and beliefs and thoughts to guide, who you're going to present yourself as a person going forward, and know that that time again will come around next year where you will reflect on all the things of the year. But it's just a great reminder of how we are so much more alike than we are different.
That's beautiful. I absolutely agree. To me, what is really striking me as being so powerful of the linkage between Kwanzaa and Hanukkah is that both holidays, and I'm thinking about Hanukkah, especially in juxtaposition to Christmas, both holidays are such powerful statements of a community's intentional celebration and determination to be themselves, to celebrate who they are, and to survive. And none of that is accidental. None of that simply happens. All of that is something that we have as being part of these communities, I think we have the privilege to really reach out and connect to and celebrate. Right now, my children, who are all between the ages of 16 and 25, are all making decisions about how observant they are as Jews. All of them are ferociously committed culturally to being, to themselves as part of the Jewish nation, as part of the Jewish people. And they're making those decisions for themselves. And I think there's a beauty to that.
Thank you both. All right, so we're going to talk about our final three holidays briefly in comparison, and then we'll go into our panel time with some pre-prescribed questions and some of the questions that you all may post in the Teams chat. So the first holiday is Soyal, which is celebrated December 21st. It is a Zuni and a Hopi Indigenous Peoples tribe holiday. It is represented by the indigenous people in the southwestern area of the United States to honor winter solstice. It celebrates the shortest day of the year, the bringing back of the sun, and marking the beginning of the wheel cycle of the year. One of the practices that's engaged during this season is pahos, which is prayer sticks, and prayers or blessings are lifted up regarding community, homes, plants, and animals. So it's a time to both be thankful and to reflect and to acknowledge the transition and the moving forward of time. The next holiday is Las Posadas, which is celebrated from December 16th through the 24th. It's celebrated in Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, and throughout Latinx or Latine people in the United States. The holiday means lodging or accommodation, and it's connected to the nativity story, which is from the Christian tradition, reflecting on the journey of the Holy Family of Jesus, Joseph, and Mary to a place of lodging, to the inn. It's celebrated for 9 days, which is intentional to represent the 9 months of gestational period of time. And then finally, we have Yule, which is celebrated on December 21st, also known as winter solstice and Christmastide. It has Germanic origins in its holiday, and it is connected to Wild Hunt, Odin, which is a Norse god, and the concept of, and I might mispronounce this, so I apologize, Modranit, which is the mother night. So during this time, they reflect on the Norse god, and the actual Yule is a modern version of Joy or Joy-Nuer, which are alternative names for the god, the Norse god Odin. Kind of the reformation or the remixing of Christmastide comes in a couple of different ways. So you have the Yule log, you have Goli or Joli, which is a, sorry, one second. Yoli, which is indicating the 12 days of the festival of Yule, and then Yule singing. So some of these may sound familiar. The Yule log is also featured on Netflix as a crackling Yule log, and they'll play holiday or wintertime mixed music. The Joli, which means the 12-day festival, can easily be connected to one of the borrowings of connective tissue for holidays that are around what's done for the holiday of Christmas in both a secular and a religious sense. And the Yule singing is similar to the concept of carol singing. Less connected or less similar are also the concept of a Yule goat and a Yule boar, which have to do with types of foods that people eat during those times. So it's important that we reflect on the various holidays that happen during the season and intentionally say happy holidays, opposed to preferencing our own holiday, presuming other people are celebrating the same ones that we are, the same ones that we've explicitly recognized in our work calendar, our school calendar, our cultural calendars, if you will. And that's part of why we wanted to lift up each and every one of these holidays that are taking place during this time, that are part of helping people live well and live intentionally in our system and in our community. Part of living well is living authentically, as we spoke about both in the holiday of Kwanzaa and in Hanukkah, and is throughout the themes of Yule, Soyal, and Las Posadas. All right, so we're going to go to some questions. I think I'm going to switch to the last slide, but not quite going to discuss this slide yet, but I have our pre-prescribed questions for our panelists. All right, so what does this holiday mean for you personally or for your family? Yoni or Dr. K, whichever can go first.
So I would say it really is almost purely family time. It's, and especially as my kids get older, 2/3 of my kids are out of the house. So it's a time, it's a time for them to come back, to come home, eating lots and lots of latkes. We're Ashkenazim, we're European Jews. So lots and lots of fried potato pancakes, delicious. And really spending that time together. And it's very quiet. It's really a time for us to be together as a family. There's very little explicitly religious, quote unquote, about it. Again, it's really it's in a lot of ways it's mostly a cultural holiday. Lately, though, with everything going on in around us in America and things happening, one of my daughters has been lecturing on anti-Semitism around at college campuses. She's been asked to do that. So I would say that that's sort of in the background of our mind of coming together as a family and preserving these traditions as a way of saying to the world, we're still here and we will continue, we will exist.
I think we're going to have some very similar answers here. I would definitely echo that. One thing my grandma has always said growing up, and you know how old people have those sayings and you don't really understand them until you get to be older. And then you start saying them and you realize that you are old people now. And one thing she always says is don't lose yourself in the world. And that sticks with me all the time. And I find myself saying that to my siblings, and they're like, please stop telling me that. And it's something that I've heard over and over again. And I feel like Kwanzaa is that time to ground yourself and not lose yourself in the world, because it's so much easier to do so now. I can't imagine growing up in this environment now where people have constant access to you. And it is just a time to put your phones down and come together, spend time with family, to talk about your year, to talk about your principles, your values, and to talk about and celebrate your culture. So because sometimes the year goes by so fast that you don't even get to do that, that you forget to do that at times. There's so much to do. I have to go to work and I have to travel to this wedding and do this and do that and the other. And you forget these things, the small things. And Kwanzaa is a time to remind me of doing so. During Kwanzaa, I always set an intention at the very end that I want to carry forward in the year that represents one of the values within Kwanzaa. And it's usually a very small intention, and I put it in my journal or my planner and continue every month. And that has been a great time for me to remind myself of who I am and who I want to be as a person.
Thank you both for sharing. Yeah. All right, so you kind of got into the next two questions, so we'll skip down a little bit. Winter is full of darkness and cold, and often it is a season of bringing up old and new and other complicated feelings, especially around grief and the realities of hardship. How do you feel that this holiday or this season speaks to those realities?
I would say the entire essence of Hanukkah is the determination to bring light where seemingly it doesn't belong, where it's not going to be. I mean, the whole Hanukkah story was the assertion of light against very, very unlikely odds. We were not supposed to win. We were not supposed to survive. We were not supposed to continue as a people. And if you think of the peoples that existed that were contemporary with us, I mean, we're talking about the Hittites. I mean, it's crazy. The Hittites, the Assyrians, these people aren't around anymore. The fact that we've survived is, I mean, for lack of a better word, miraculous. So, to me, Hanukkah is a very powerful statement of if we keep trying, keep showing up, keep trying to bring light to this world through being ourselves and to help each other to be ourselves, we can accomplish far more than we ever expected that we'd be able to do.
I think very similarly, Kwanzaa has a lot to do with honoring your ancestors. The holidays will never not be hard when you've lost someone, so it does not take away that, but it provides a safe space to know that you're coming to honor your ancestors and your elders living, and your ancestors that have passed along. So it's a great time to find joy in having that person have been a part of your life. in honoring the cycle of life and knowing that people will pass on. But our job is to carry their name. And that is one of the big things too that we discuss is your family legacy in your lineage and carrying that name. So it's a great time to celebrate your ancestors, and acknowledge how hard it is that they are no longer in your life, but what they have instilled in you as a person during that time frame. So I think it's just really joyous, because grief is hard. And in the moment when someone passes, that grief is different than what it might look like during Kwanzaa, where you've had time to process it. Especially for me, being an ICU physician, I don't process grief. It is a defense mechanism. I don't process death in the moment because I can't do my job if in that moment I am grieving because I need to continue to care for the other 20 kids on my unit. And that has reflected in my personal life as well too, when people do pass along, is that I struggle processing in the moment. So for me, Kwanzaa is a great time to further process and celebrate our ancestors and to say thank you for the value that person has added to my life.
Thank you, Dr. K, for sharing that and the connection to the work that you do. Part of the particularities of coming up with that particular question is, as a UCC minister and as a Christian, I've been part of a variety of worshiping communities within the Christian faith and the Protestant variety, and I've always found it to be a gift when we have a Hard to Be Merry or Blue Christmas service where we talk about those we've lost over the past years or that we've lost more recently, and how we sit with the celebratory time and nature of the season and reflect and hold on to the space that some people are not at the table anymore. Some people will not be part of the story in a concrete or externally visible way, the way they used to be. And I think that's such an important and powerful component, especially during this time of year as things are darker and people reflect on the old, the new, and where we are. What is the most common misunderstanding about this day/season? We're going to mix it up. Dr. K, can you go first for this one?
I was just about to say I'm going to unmute and go first. I kind of touched on this then. One, Kwanzaa is not a religious holiday. Two, a lot of people think that Kwanzaa is from Africa, like a holiday that originated in Africa, and now we just have found a way to do so in the US. And then there are sometimes I get comments about Kwanzaa that make me feel like there are some people who believe it is this concept of you're singling out a race to celebrate. And that is always difficult in conversations, and that is an underlying tone in so many things that are happening in this generation and these days. And so that is one thing also, is that it is just meant to celebrate a culture and a people, and you can also participate in celebrating that culture. I don't have Kwanzaa events at my home and say this is only for Black people. That is not the case. It is meant to celebrate our culture, our families, all of those things, our values and our communities, but it is not to say that other people can't celebrate that as well. And it is important for us to celebrate it because for a while we were not allowed to. We didn't have access to, we were not taught things. So there is so much that goes into Kwanzaa in the sense of even just passing along so much of our history that, the same way we spoke about so many things in Hanukkah is associated with the Jewish population in regard to things being taken from you and the goal of you not knowing a native language or an alphabet or something along the lines of that. And Kwanzaa is a great time to remind us of those things and share that, but it is not meant to be an exclusive holiday. It's just a time for us to celebrate who we are.
So this actually links to the question we just had before, and I realized I didn't really answer the question as it was asked. How do I deal with grief around this time of the holidays? So I realized in that moment that was a hard question for me to answer because this isn't my holiday season. And so the biggest misconception is that Hanukkah is Jewish Christmas. It just isn't. It really isn't. It's a minor holiday. It's lovely. It's meaningful. But when I lived in Israel, it was very quiet, as opposed to the major Jewish holidays, which just engulfed us. So I would say that this time of the year, it's a sad irony that it's this time of the year for Jewish people often is the time where we feel the least a part of the world around, of America, of the world around us, because we are, to the extent that we're not participating in the majority culture celebrating Christmas however they celebrate it. My children were once asked by, someone who wasn't Jewish, like, don't you feel jealous that you don't have Christmas? And I felt as a Jewish father so proud of them when they snorted and said, we have like 10 holidays, you have one. But it is difficult it really accentuates the feeling of not fitting in. So I would say that Hanukkah is a very happy time for Jewish people, but there's always the mixed in awkwardness and sadness of, okay, well, we have to negotiate. How do we talk to, how do we work with all of our coworkers who are expecting us to be a part of what they think is as normal American life, and we're not a part of that.
Thank you, Yoni, for lifting that up. That's very powerful. And I think that's part of why having these types of conversations and reflection times are so necessary and needed. I know as an African-American growing up in predominantly white areas, I consistently had people assuming that I celebrated Kwanzaa. And for a while till I was an adult and had celebrated actual Kwanzaa, I remember it being a common connection with fellow African-Americans of how many times have you gotten asked about if you celebrate Kwanzaa from your white, well-meaning liberal friends, and how few of us actually celebrate it, because I always associated it with my white racist liberal friends instead of the empowerment of my community till I was an adult. So yeah, it's powerful. The stories that we share and the customs that we pass on and how we hold that space in the midst of other people wanting to understand, not understanding, or just the state and nature of culture and community. So I think that's so powerful what you said, Yoni. Really appreciate that. All right, I have our final pre-prescribed question. What is the main thing that you would like people to understand about this time and the value to those who celebrate it? Yoni, you can go again for this one.
Gosh, I feel like I think I've already spoke to it. I think what I would hope people would understand is the huge meaning and pride that Jewish people around the world feel about being part of what I always think of as a tapestry. It's this incredibly rich tapestry of a culture that's existed for thousands of years. And we're just a small part of it. But the privilege we get to be a part of something so much larger than ourselves, and how much meaning that gives that gives me and gives everybody in my family and my community, to be a part of that. I think Hanukkah is a time for us to celebrate that by, in the midst of the darkness, in the midst of often feeling let out or worse or threatened, to say, no, what we are is beautiful, what we are is meaningful, and we're going to celebrate that. And if we can do that, maybe others can celebrate who they are too. So I hope that people understand Hanukkah as a time for Jewish people to celebrate quite simply who they are.
My answer would be the exact same. It is a time for us to celebrate who we are. It is a joyous time. It is a happy time. It can be a sad time during times of reflection during that time, but it is really a carved out space to be intentional and remembering those things, maybe learning some new things about your culture or your background that you might not have known, maybe exposing yourself to something new. So really, just that, I would say. I agree.
Well, thank you both for sharing your perspectives and experiences. Erica has placed the QRC code and it's also on the screen now. Okay, I see some questions. Fun note. Okay, question. As a white non-Jewish woman, how may I honor or stand as an ally to my friends, colleagues, and strangers who participate, reflect, and celebrate, and take time for Kwanzaa and Hanukkah this holiday season?
Doctor?
I think there's always this awkwardness that comes in the room, or uncomfortableness that comes in the room when it comes to asking questions and being present in the celebrations and the holidays of others. I think it's a very naturalness that in a space that it comes from. Whether or not it be curiosity, whether or not truly, you know, wanting to just be involved and to feel and to see and to experience the foods, the smells, the culture, the dance, all of those things. I would say one thing is have those conversations with those around you that are different and celebrate holidays, of course, differently. Ask questions. Look into things on your own as well. Like, this is a great series to be present at, so that, you know, you can say, hey, I attended this talk and this is what I learned, or I see that you celebrate and I didn't know this. And those are great conversation starters in that sense too. I would also say that there are a lot of events around the city. Should you be available to attend things or something along the lines of that, you know, having your family go, or younger kids or something, to really expose people to inclusivity and seeing how others celebrate as well. But I think the biggest thing when it comes to being an ally is having the conversation and creating those safe spaces where you can learn more from that person. And then that person also knows that they can safely celebrate around you. Right now, I have on a sweatshirt that has all the seven principles of Kwanzaa. It is one of my favorite ones to wear during the holiday season, because I love when people ask me, what in the world does your sweatshirt say? And it is such a conversation starter and really gives me that space to be able to, you know, include people in how I celebrate.
I can't add to that. That's perfect.
Well, again, thank you both for sharing in your openness, and thank you, audience members, for participating in the chat and all of the affirmations. Make sure that Yoni and Dr. K, make sure you check that out. I'm going to pass the ball over to Ashley to close us out.
Thank you. And we are getting so much positive feedback in the chat. And so please, Dr. K and Yoni, please take a moment to look at that as well when you can. But thank you all. Thank you to Lex for moderating and really leading and creating this session. And it's just such a gift to hear you share and to hear your personal perspectives and experiences. So thank you for sharing that with us today. And I think we all have an opportunity to continue to strengthen our allyship. I know for me, there's no way now I can enter this season without thinking about all the winter mix, the Hanukkah, everything that I've heard today is going to be with me as I enter this season, and as I'm in this season right now. So thank you. Lex, you mentioned it, but we put the QR code for the survey in the chat. This is really important to us. We want to make sure this series continues to reflect our community, continues to reflect what's meaningful and valuable to us. So the only way we can do that is by getting your feedback. And we do read and review all of that. So thank you so much there. And if you want to continue the conversation, we've actually done something unique for this particular session. We have a comment field on our so there's a website on the SharePoint that I shared earlier. There's a comment field. So if you want to tell us how you celebrate, we were able to hear today from a few of our team members, but go ahead and let us know. We would love to open that conversation up. We do want to remind you to just be conscious and friendly about, you know, your comments and making sure that we're community building. And then I would just love to leave on the note of what Dr. K said is the curiosity, humble curiosity. Let's continue to ask questions, not move an assumption. People are celebrating and honoring different things or not. You know, I often get reminded because one of my dearest friends is a Jehovah's Witness and she celebrates nothing around this time. So we there's just so much that we can move in the space of inclusion, and I'm just thrilled to be here. So we're right at time. I'm going to stop because I want to honor your time, but thank you so much. And again, thank you to our moderator and panelists for today. So take care, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.